Hello again, biologists. In this screencast, we'll finish Chapter 2 and continue talking about the chemistry and molecules of life. The molecules found in living things are very large. The largest protein in the human body, for example, contains over 400,000 atoms. We call the large molecules in living things macromolecules. Macro is the opposite of micro and means large. Most macromolecules are composed of smaller subunits called monomers. The monomers link together to form larger polymers. To help you remember, remind yourself that mono means one, poly means many, and mer comes from the Greek word meros, meaning part. The macromolecules found in organisms can be organized into 4 different types: carbohydrates, or simply carbs, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. We will go into a little more detail about each one. Carbohydrates, or carbs for short, are the sugars and starches found in living things. All carbohydrates are made up of sugar monomers. The technical name for these sugar monomers is monosaccharides. Zacchari is the Greek word for sugar. Sugars link together to form more complex sugars and starches. Sugars are used by living things as a quick source of energy. Think of the sugar high we get when we eat foods that are high in sugar, like candy. Starches are used by plants and animals as a longer-term source of energy. Think of the starch found in vegetables like potatoes and taro. In animals, including us, starch is stored in the form of glycogen in our muscles. Cellulose is a structural carbohydrate that makes up the cell walls of plants. In regular conversation, we refer to cellulose as fiber. Chitin is a structural carbohydrate found in the exoskeletons of animals like insects and crustaceans. Cellulose and chitin provide structure, support, and protection for these organisms. Proteins are a second type of macromolecule found in living things. Proteins are made up of monomers called amino acids. Proteins are important for a number of different reasons. Proteins make up structures called enzymes that help us carry out almost all processes in our bodies. Insulin, for example, is a protein that keeps our blood sugar low, preventing diabetes. Proteins provide structure in our hair, nails, skin, tendons, and ligaments. Keratin is the protein found in our hair and nails. Collagen is the protein that keeps our skin elastic. Tendons, like our Achilles tendon, connects muscles to bones, and ligaments, like our ACL, connect bones to other bones. Finally, proteins in our muscles allow us to move. Nucleic acids are another type of macromolecule and are made up of subunits called nucleotides. Nucleic acids are responsible for storing and transmitting genetic information. DNA and RNA are 2 examples. DNA has its familiar shape because it consists of a double chain of nucleotides that are twisted around each other into what we call a double helix. RNA is only made up of 1 chain of nucleotides. Instead of the double helix shape, it has a single helix shape. DNA is the blueprint or master plan for an organism. It has all the information needed to build, maintain, and repair an organism. RNA helps DNA carry out what's in its blueprint of guidelines. Lipids are the final type of macromolecule. The word lipid comes from the Greek word for fat, lipos. Lipids are the only macromolecule that are not made of monomers. They are still large molecules, but they are not made up of smaller repeating units. Lipids include fats, oils, waxes, and steroid hormones like testosterone and estrogen. The basic unit of life is the cell. Cells are made up of all the different macromolecules we just talked about. Cells in all living things have some shared basic architecture. All cells are surrounded by a cell membrane. Cell membranes are made up of a phospholipid double layer with embedded proteins. Phospholipids are lipids that have a phosphorus component. The double layer is also called a bilayer. The proteins in the cell membrane serve a number of functions, including acting as channels and helping cells communicate with other cells. The cell membrane separates the inside contents of a cell from the outside environment. Phospholipids have two parts, a hydrophilic or water-loving head and a hydrophobic or water-fearing tail. The phospholipid head on each side of the bilayer points towards the watery inside and outside of the cell. The phospholipid tails on each side are oriented towards the inside of the bilayer. Water is another very important molecule to life. All of life's chemical reactions take place in water, whose chemical formula is H2O. Many of water's characteristics come from its shape. The oxygen in a water molecule is considered an electron hog. The electrons in the covalent bonds of water will spend more time around the oxygen atom than the hydrogen atoms. As a result, the oxygen atom will have a slight negative charge, and the hydrogen atoms will have a slight positive charge. We say that water is a polar molecule, with a positive pole or side and a negative pole or side. Because opposites attract, the positive poles on water molecules will be attracted to negative poles on other water molecules. They form what we call hydrogen bonds. Because of hydrogen bonding, water molecules stick to each other. We call this cohesion. It causes the skin-like surface of a drop of water, or what you see at the top of a cup of water that's been filled as much as it can without spilling over. Hydrogen bonding also causes water to stick to other surfaces, like glass. This is called adhesion. Because of hydrogen bonding, it takes a lot of energy for water to evaporate or boil. We say that it has a large liquid range. It stays in its liquid form above 0 degrees Celsius and below 100 degrees Celsius. Solid water is also less dense than liquid water because water in its solid form cannot form as many hydrogen bonds as it can in its liquid form. As a result, ice will float in water. Water is called a universal solvent because water can dissolve more substances than any other liquid found in nature. It cannot dissolve every substance, including things like fats, waxes, and oils. Things that dissolve in water or other solvents are called solutes. Water can transport all of life's dissolved molecules. Water can interact with charged ions, like the sodium and chloride ions in table salt. Water's positive poles interact with negative chloride ions, and water's negative poles interact with positive sodium ions. Polar molecules and substances with ionic bonds dissolve in water. To review, ionic bonds are formed when atoms gain or lose electrons with one another. In table salt, sodium loses an electron to become positive, and chlorine gains an electron to become negative. Ions are the product of an ionic bond. Water molecules can also briefly split into positive hydrogen ions, or H+, and negative hydroxide ions, or OH-. pH is a measure of the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. The higher the H+ concentration, the lower the pH. pH ranges from 0 to 14. Pure water is said to have a neutral pH, or a pH near 7. Acids have a higher concentration of H+, and pHs closer to 0. Coffee and orange juice are considered acidic. Bases have a lower concentration of H+, and pHs closer to 14. Ammonia and baking soda are considered basic. To close things out, there are a few exceptions or boundary cases that bend the rules of life on Earth. Viruses, for example, reproduce but are not made of cells. Prions are infectious proteins that can also reproduce but are not made of cells. Most biologists would not consider viruses or prions to be living. Maybe we should be more flexible about what we expect in terms of Martian life or other life forms outside the planet Earth. Life elsewhere might not be dependent on water or made up of organic molecules. We also find life in very strange places on Earth. Extremophiles are bacteria that can tolerate places on Earth with high arsenic levels, temperatures, and pressure. Maybe there are extremophiles somewhere else in the universe. Even though they are not considered living, maybe there are viruses or prions out there.